Hey everybody, your boy Seth here coming at you with something completely different. Folks who've been following All In for a while now might be aware that I've got a bit of a reputation for being the resident music guy on our little Nintendo podcast. I've actually been a novice, hobbyist, and frankly subpar musician for about 17 years. But music, and video game music in particular, is something I am very passionate about. I'm just as likely to listen to something like the soundtrack to Okami as I would be to listen to the newest Taylor Swift release, which is high praise coming from me, believe me. And little video essays is something I've always wanted to do here on YouTube, but I've never really taken a crack at it before, so I thought, what better time than the present? I thought it might be kind of a fun little experiment to count down my top 5 favorite Nintendo game soundtracks of 2021. Now, before I get started, I should note that I obviously have not played everything. There's some Nintendo games like Deltarune Chapter 2, for example, that I'm positive have phenomenal music, but I just haven't played them yet. And I'm also not going to get too bogged down in things like music theory and stuff like that, which admittedly is something I've been guilty of doing on our podcast. I'm just going to spotlight some great Nintendo game soundtracks from the Nintendo games that I personally played on my Nintendo Switch this year and tell you why I think they're special. And of course, I'm going to be doing it with plenty of traditional video game YouTuber narration, drama, pomp, and circumstance, so let's get right into it. These are my top 5 favorite Nintendo game soundtracks of 2021. We all know and love the score for Super Mario 3D World, but it's the newly added Bowser's Fury component that I really want to focus on here. It's at once quintessential modern 3D Mario while still branching out, creating its own Bowser's Fury flavor and feeling totally unique to this. The bouncy, jumpy, up and down bass lines of something like Scamper Shores nail what's already great about modern Mario music. The feeling of fun, the composition itself literally reflecting what's happening on screen. I mean, just talk about inviting music, right? One track that really stuck out to me was Crisp Climb Castle. That's a tongue twister. It's this beautiful, sweeping, whimsical sort of waltz track that called both Super Mario Galaxy's Comet Observatory theme and Super Mario Odyssey's Cap Kingdom theme to mind. Absolutely loved it. This one, if you'll pardon the pun, stopped me dead in my tracks when I first heard it. But of course, you can't talk about Bowser's Fury without talking about the metal. Fury Bowser's theme is this ripping, roaring, distorted heavy metal track with a killer hooky riff that you'll never forget and growling vocals that I can only hope were provided by Bowser voice actor and friend of All In, by the way, Mr. Kenny James. And they are complemented perfectly by the sharp, choral vocals. Oh, it is so good! People who've been listening to my stuff this year probably won't be surprised to see No More Heroes 3 on my list. I absolutely loved this game, and one of my favorite aspects of it is how much of Suda51's vision involved intimate collaboration. The entire thing feels like a punk rock jam session in Suda's garage, and that certainly extends to the music. One of the major forces behind writing and producing the game's soundtrack was Nobuaki Kaneko, who is a fairly prolific Japanese alternative metal musician. A lot of Kaneko's prior experience working on OSTs was in the realm of film, so video games were a new challenge. No More Heroes 3 features some unique, bombastic loops that can range from vibey psychedelic to in-your-face crunchy bits like this track from the Oma boss fight. Many other artists collaborated on the No More Heroes 3 OST, but I really want to take a second to highlight the return of Travis Strikes Again lead composer Kazuhiro Mibi Abo and the work he did with hip-hop artist Omura on the now legendary Sushi Shop track, Itadakimasu.
Alright, drop speech up with the bodies. Like making sushi a hobby. Ain't no assassin and saucy. I'm a hero, you ain't better stop. Nah, doing it head for step. What would it be for a weapon? Suplex, now we rest. Sword stab, give your chest in.
Mibi explained that the inspiration and idea behind this track was to break down certain anti-African American racial stereotypes in Japanese culture as it relates to sushi specifically. Infusing this track with hip-hop influences that leave you feeling completely shaken every time Travis stops in for a Tamago roll. To call this the standout track of No More Heroes 3 would be a massive understatement.
I'm on a roll when I'm macking up, yeah. Hey, roll it like a bowling ball. Hey, once see food and beef, oh, pick and hold it all. Do what I never been below the law. Took a bite and the nori went and gave my soul a call.
When I first got into the Monster Hunter series by way of Monster Hunter World back in 2018, I fell hard. And I'm glad I did, because what I found wasn't just a deeply satisfying combat system and an admittedly addicting reward loop, but a superb soundtrack. So when Monster Hunter Rise released on Nintendo Switch back in March, I came into it with high expectations for its score. And boy, it did not disappoint. The Monster Hunter series has always had great music, but it's been comfortable to tread familiar ground, until now. And Monster Hunter Rise makes its statement right from the outset, literally with the game's title screen. It's this very traditional Japanese vocal performance by one of the Komura Shrine Maidens that is at once haunting, mystical, and inviting. Let's be honest, you come into this game expecting it to be non-stop action and hunting enormous monsters, and it is. But that isn't all it is. The Komura Village theme, or the Song of Purification, is a beautiful, sweeping song that features harmonies from both of the Shrine Maidens, and the plucking of a traditional Japanese lute, or koto. The music makes Komura feel like a sacred place, worth protecting. And then the deep strings that come in behind the chorus elevate it instantly into a grander scale, only to be brought gently back down with the wind flutes and the post-chorus breakdown. It's wonderful stuff. The score isn't afraid, however, to let you know when it's time for the titular Monster Hunter monsters. Many of the monsters in this game actually receive their own individual theme tracks, but my favorite one has got to be the game's signature monster, the Magnamalo. I love the traditional, twangy Japanese strings that carry throughout the entire track, but immediately ramp up into almost fearful choral vocals and pounding, intimidating drums. The music literally sounds like the Magnamalo itself. Powerful, scary, wreathed in dark flame and bearing down at you. So I can totally understand why most Monster Hunter fans will probably just let its soundtrack fade into the background as they're farming their millionth Zinogre, like I did. But for me, it is a monumental element of what made this game so special. When I played Acid Nerve's Death's Door on my PC back in July, I knew pretty quickly that it would be one of my very favorite games of the year, and I was thrilled to be able to play the game again on my Nintendo Switch when it finally released back in November. And there's plenty to love about Death's Door, but the thing I keep coming back to in my mind is the music. This game's soundtrack is one of the best examples I can point to of a game having an audio aesthetic. Now, David Fenn's score for Death's Door does utilize some recurring themes and leitmotifs, but that isn't even necessarily what I'm talking about here. It somehow manages to convey a singular tone that feels like Death's Door, even through fairly complex compositions involving a huge variety of instruments. Take the Ceramic Manor, for example, the game's first real dungeon. Of course, the piano melody is front and center here, but as you begin to peel back the layers of sound, you can pick out so much more bubbling underneath the surface. The rising synth that marries with the choral notes, almost calling to mind the lost souls that you'll find in the manor's depths. The mandolin strumming quietly under the surface, almost sounding like a tea kettle about to boil over. Very appropriate. It's got a peaceful melody in the foreground with a background of slow, rising tension, and it is the perfect way to convey how this dungeon is supposed to feel. And then you take something like the Avarice theme, and it couldn't be more different. This is all early game stuff, by the way. I wouldn't dare spoil things for you. But I mean, there's no subtlety here. It's bombastic. It's in your face. It is go time. It's got every ounce of jet fuel you would expect to find in a high-octane battle track like this. Plenty of electric guitar and drum kicks. But then it layers in things like marimba and some of those choral tones we've seen throughout the rest of the game that make it still feel like Death's Door. And this is exactly what I've been driving at. David Fenn's score manages to feel extraordinarily varied and still singular. It's impressive stuff. Maybe even more importantly than that, though, is that Death's Door also knows exactly when to pull back. There are moments in the game's story that I wouldn't dare spoil here, but when those moments happen and they need the room to breathe and just exist in themselves, the game knows when to allow for that. This can be a somber game, and Death's Door isn't afraid to embrace it. Simply put, David Fenn knows how to step out of his own way when he needs to with this game's score, and I love it so much for that. I know, you're probably groaning right now as you're watching this. I can practically hear it. And look, I'm not going to deny any of you naysayers out there for this spot on my list. I mean, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are technically remakes, right? No matter how good this game's score is, these compositions are ultimately over 15 years old at this point, right? You fool, you must be thinking, surely that would disqualify it. Yeah, I get it, but hear me out. While it's true that the score of this game isn't entirely new, it has been entirely and beautifully redone for these Gen 4 Pokemon remakes. It would have been enough by any standard to just well, play these old songs again with newer instruments and cleaner mastering with modern technology and all the rest. But I really do feel like the treatment here was handled with such care, and every single track is elevated and given a burst of vibrant life as a result. Say whatever you will about recency bias, these games are just full of delicious, ooey gooey ear candy. I mean, take the Jubilife City theme for example. This stuff was already great. But then you hear the Jubilife City theme in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl? I mean, that beautiful, gentle sax rolling in, the bells and the percussion, it's wonderful. It totally retains the vibe of the original track, but it's just taking it to another level for these remakes. It's perfect. And just one or two standout tracks in the remake would have been par for the course, more or less what I expected coming in. But it just never lets up. Right from the beginning of the game, this OST smacks you in the face and demands your attention, as if to say, no sir, I am something special. I had to just literally stop in the middle of streaming the game on twitch.tv/allinpodcast just to listen to the new Lake Verity theme. And it doesn't just apply to big locations or central themes either. Tell me why the area music for Route 216 needed to go this hard. Listen to how smooth that guitar is, man, and the focus on percussion comes back in with full-on, tambourine. Route 216 didn't need to go that hard, but it did. It did that for us. I've seen some people online say that they don't like the remaster treatment, or that they have too much nostalgia for the original release of Diamond and Pearl to accept what Ilka has done to their childhood or whatever, and that's probably fair. Although, for me, it had been several years since I'd played these games or heard this soundtrack, which made playing the remakes almost like a fresh playthrough. Like getting to hear this music for the first time again. And it just continued to floor me the entire way through in ways I just didn't expect. And honestly, it made for one of the most fun and memorable experiences I've had with a video game soundtrack in years, not just in 2021. So, there you have it. What one opinionated dude on the internet who happened to make a YouTube video thinks are the top 5 best Nintendo game soundtracks of 2021. It was honestly a banger of a year for video game music, and there were so many more that are deserving of being put on a list like this. Games that are not even on the Nintendo Switch. I would have loved to spotlight something like Chicory on this list, for example, but at the time of this recording, it hasn't made its way to the Nintendo Switch. Yet. Make it happen, Greg. Anyway, what are your favorite video game soundtracks of 2021? Comment below and let me know. Wow, that was very Jeremy Johns of me. And hey, this is my first ever time making something like this, so how'd I do? I sure did have a lot of fun making it, and if you dug this video, I would love it if you shared it with your music-loving friends and checked out the full credits and links in the episode description. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I love and appreciate you all. Hey, do me a favor. Have fun and go listen to some great video game music today. I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.